The oscilloscope's green trace flickered erratically across the cathode ray tube as Squadron Leader James Morrison pressed his ear closer to the captured Würzburg radar set, listening to the electronic heartbeat of Nazi Germany's air defense network. It was 3:47 in the morning on February 23, 1943, in a converted aircraft hangar at the Royal Aircraft Establishment in Farnborough, and Morrison was about to commit an act of technical disobedience that would reshape the entire air war over Europe. The device before him, still bearing scorched Wehrmacht markings from its violent extraction from occupied France, hummed with secrets that his superiors had explicitly forbidden him to unlock. As Morrison's trembling fingers reached toward the main power coupling, preparing to violate direct orders from Air Ministry, he had no comprehension that his unauthorized analysis would reveal how perilously close Britain had come to losing control of its own skies. The metallic taste of fear filled his mouth as he realized that everything the Royal Air Force believed about German radar capabilities was catastrophically wrong, and that one man's act of technical rebellion that cold February morning would determine whether Allied bombers could ever safely penetrate the Reich's electronic fortress. No one in the telecommunications research establishment knew that one man's defiance that morning would rewrite the fundamental mathematics of aerial warfare and expose the terrifying sophistication of an enemy who had been watching every British aircraft cross the Channel for nearly 2 years. James Morrison had never intended to become the man who would unlock Nazi Germany's most carefully guarded electronic secrets. Born in 1917 to a family of Methodist clockmakers in the Yorkshire village of Hebden Bridge, Morrison possessed the sort of methodical mechanical intuition that comes from childhood, spent surrounded by precision gears and delicate escapement mechanisms. His father, Thomas Morrison, had spent 32 years crafting church clocks whose chimes marked time for 3 generations of Yorkshire families, and had taught young James that understanding any complex mechanism required patience, reverence, and the willingness to see patterns that others missed. When James left for Cambridge in 1935 to study electrical engineering, he carried with him not only his father's mechanical instincts, but also a deeply ingrained belief that every machine possessed an internal logic that could be comprehended if approached with sufficient respect and determination. His professors at Trinity College quickly recognized Morrison's unusual gift for intuiting electronic circuits, particularly his ability to diagnose circuit failures by listening to the subtle variations in electrical hum that escaped detection by conventional testing equipment. During his final year, when most engineering students focused on theoretical power systems or industrial applications, Morrison became fascinated by the emerging science of radio direction finding, spending countless evening hours in the college workshop building increasingly sophisticated radio receivers that could detect and analyze distant transmissions with remarkable precision. His academic excellence earned him immediate recruitment into the nascent radar development program at the start of the war. But Morrison's first months at the Telecommunications Research Establishment revealed how dramatically different military engineering demanded from academic theory. Unlike university laboratories where experimentation proceeded at a scholarly pace, wartime radar development operated under crushing pressure to produce functional systems that could immediately counter German aerial superiority. Morrison discovered that his colleagues, brilliant though they were, approached captured enemy equipment with a cautious conservatism that prioritized avoiding mistakes over achieving breakthrough understanding. When German radar components arrived at Farnborough for analysis, standard protocol required systematic documentation and measurement using established procedures that often took weeks to complete, followed by careful reports that meticulously described observed specifications without attempting deeper interpretive analysis. Morrison watched senior engineers spending precious months cataloging circuit components and measuring signal frequencies while avoiding any investigative techniques that might damage the captured equipment. even though such cautious methodology prevented them from understanding how German systems actually functioned in combat conditions. The frustration of working within such rigid constraints intensified as Morrison began recognizing that British radar technology, despite its pioneering origins, was falling behind German innovations at an alarming rate. Intelligence reports arriving from occupied Europe described German radar installations with capabilities that seemed to exceed anything in British inventory. Yet Morrison's superiors consistently dismissed such reports as exaggerated or misunderstood by untrained observers. Morrison's growing conviction that the Royal Air Force was operating under dangerous misconceptions about enemy radar capabilities put him in increasing conflict with his immediate supervisor, Wing Commander Harold Atkinson, who insisted that systematic procedure and careful documentation represented the only scientifically valid approach to understanding captured enemy technology. Atkinson repeatedly reminded Morrison that unauthorized experimentation with captured equipment violated both military protocol and scientific methodology, and that hasty analysis based on incomplete understanding could lead to catastrophic misinterpretation of German capabilities. But Morrison had begun detecting patterns in the fragmentary intelligence reports that suggested German radar technology possessed a sophistication that British analysis was completely missing, and his engineering instincts told him that conventional analytical methods would never reveal the true extent of German electronic superiority. He had no idea that soon those instincts would be all that stood between the Royal Air Force and the complete exposure of every Allied bomber operation crossing into occupied Europe. The broader strategic context surrounding Morrison's work in February 1943 reflected the increasingly desperate situation facing Allied air operations over occupied Europe. The combined bomber offensive, launched with such optimism during the previous summer, had encountered German air defenses of shocking effectiveness, with Allied bomber losses reaching unsustainable levels that threatened to halt strategic bombing operations entirely. During January 1943 alone, the Royal Air Force had lost 237 heavy bombers over occupied territory, representing not only millions of pounds in irreplaceable aircraft, but also the lives of over 1,500 highly trained air crew whose replacement required months of specialized training that Britain could no longer afford. American 8th Air Force operations had suffered even more catastrophic losses, with some daylight bombing missions experiencing casualty rates exceeding 20%, leading to heated debates within Allied command about whether strategic bombing remained viable against German defenses. Intelligence analyses of these mounting losses consistently pointed toward German radar technology as the primary factor enabling Luftwaffe night fighters to intercept Allied bombers with devastating accuracy, but British understanding of German radar capabilities remained fragmentary and contradictory. Prisoner interrogations provided only limited insight into German radar technology, since most captured Luftwaffe personnel possessed only operational knowledge of their equipment without technical understanding of underlying systems. Photographic reconnaissance of German radar installations revealed increasing numbers of sophisticated antenna arrays throughout occupied Europe, but aerial photographs could not determine the operational capabilities or technical specifications of the electronic systems these installations contained. Most troubling were intelligence reports from resistance networks describing German radar installations that appeared capable of tracking individual aircraft at ranges exceeding anything achieved by British radar systems. Yet these reports were routinely dismissed by British technical experts who insisted that German radar technology remained inferior to British developments. This technological intelligence gap had profound implications for Allied bombing strategy, since effective penetration of German airspace required accurate understanding of enemy radar coverage, detection ranges, and operational procedures. RAF Bomber Command continued planning missions based on assumptions about German radar capabilities that were increasingly divorced from battlefield reality, leading to routing decisions and tactical procedures that inadvertently exposed Allied aircraft to German defensive systems, operating with far greater capability than British planners realized. The mathematical calculations underlying bombing mission planning assumed German radar detection ranges of approximately 30 to 40 miles under optimal conditions, leading to flight path selections that kept Allied bombers well beyond what British intelligence considered the effective range of German coastal radar installations. In reality, advanced German radar systems were detecting Allied aircraft formation at ranges exceeding 100 miles, providing Luftwaffe controllers with sufficient advance warning to position night fighters along predicted bomber routes with lethal precision. The strategic implications of this intelligence failure extended far beyond individual bombing missions, since Allied planning for the eventual invasion of occupied Europe depended fundamentally upon achieving air superiority over the landing zones through systematic destruction of German air defenses. If German radar technology possessed capabilities that British intelligence had failed to comprehend, then the entire premise underlying Allied invasion planning might prove catastrophically flawed, potentially leading to the destruction of Allied invasion forces before they could establish secure beachheads. Churchill's scientific advisors had privately expressed growing concern about intelligence gaps regarding German technological capabilities, but their warnings had been dismissed by military commanders who insisted that British radar technology remained superior to anything the Germans could develop. The mathematical reality was starker than most Allied commanders understood. If German radar systems could detect Allied aircraft at twice the range that British intelligence believed possible, then every Allied bombing mission was flying into a defensive network of unprecedented effectiveness, and the entire strategic bombing campaign was operating under assumptions that would inevitably lead to unsustainable losses. Soon this technological blindness would be shattered by one man's unauthorized investigation of a device that contained secrets capable of rewriting the entire strategic balance of the air war. The crisis that would transform Morrison from a dutiful military engineer into a technological revolutionary began with the arrival of an intact Würzburg radar set captured during the extraordinary Bruneval raid of February 27, 1942. British paratroopers had conducted a daring nighttime assault on a German radar installation positioned on the cliffs of occupied France, successfully dismantling and extracting key components of the Würzburg system under intense enemy fire. The captured equipment represented the most complete sample of advanced German radar technology ever obtained by British intelligence, containing electronic components and circuit designs that could potentially reveal the full extent of German radar capabilities. However, the initial analysis of the Würzburg components had been conducted according to standard protocol, involving careful external examination and basic electrical measurements without attempting to understand the internal operating principles that made German radar systems so devastatingly effective against Allied bombing operations. Morrison had observed this preliminary analysis with mounting frustration, recognizing that conventional examination techniques were revealing only superficial characteristics of the German equipment, while missing the fundamental innovations that enabled superior performance. The Würzburg system's external specifications appeared similar to British radar installations, leading analysts to conclude that German radar technology remained roughly equivalent to British capabilities. But Morrison's engineering intuition told him that surface similarities were concealing radical differences in internal design philosophy. During the preliminary analysis, Morrison had detected subtle electrical signatures in the German equipment that suggested circuit innovations unknown to British radar technology. But his attempts to pursue deeper investigation had been blocked by Wing Commander Atkinson's insistence on following established procedures. The mounting losses suffered by RAF Bomber Command during January and February 1943 had created an atmosphere of desperate urgency within the telecommunications research establishment. As senior officers struggled to understand why German air defenses were achieving such devastating effectiveness against Allied bombing operations, Morrison found himself assigned to a hastily assembled technical team tasked with conducting accelerated analysis of the captured Würzburg components. But even this emergency investigation remained constrained by rigid protocols that prevented the sort of comprehensive reverse engineering that Morrison believed necessary to understand German technical innovations. Wing Commander Atkinson had made clear that any analysis techniques risking damage to the captured equipment required explicit authorization from Air Ministry, and that unauthorized experimentation would result in immediate court-martial proceedings. Morrison's growing conviction that conventional analysis was inadequate reached a breaking point during a briefing session on February 22nd, when intelligence officers presented casualty statistics from the previous month's bombing operations. The numbers were staggering. Allied bomber losses had increased by 47% compared to the previous quarter, with German night fighters achieving interception rates that seemed mathematically impossible, given British assumptions about German radar capabilities. Morrison listened to senior officers speculating about improved German fighter tactics or enhanced pilot training, while completely ignoring the possibility that German radar technology might possess capabilities far exceeding British estimates. When Morrison attempted to suggest that the captured Würzburg equipment might contain technological innovations that explained German defensive superiority, his concerns were dismissed as premature speculation based on incomplete analysis. That evening, alone in his quarters, Morrison made the decision that would define the remainder of his career and potentially alter the outcome of the air war over Europe. He resolved to conduct an unauthorized comprehensive analysis of the Würzburg system, using investigative techniques that conventional protocol considered too risky for captured equipment. Morrison understood that such unauthorized experimentation violated direct orders and could result in court-martial, but he also recognized that continued adherence to inadequate analytical methods would condemn Allied aircrew to mounting casualties, while German technological superiority remained hidden behind bureaucratic caution. The mathematics of aerial warfare had shifted decisively in favor of German defenses, and Morrison believed that only radical investigative methods could reveal the technological innovations that had created such devastating German advantage. He spent the remainder of that night developing a systematic plan for comprehensive reverse engineering of the Würzburg system, identifying specific circuit components and operating procedures that required detailed analysis despite the risk of damaging the captured equipment. Morrison knew that he possessed perhaps 12 hours before his unauthorized activities would be discovered, and that he needed to uncover enough technical information during that brief window to justify his violation of direct orders. As he prepared to enter the Farnborough laboratory where the captured German equipment waited in darkness, Morrison had no conception that his act of technical rebellion would expose one of the most carefully guarded secrets of Nazi Germany's electronic warfare capabilities. He thought it was a desperate gamble to save Allied bomber crews from mounting casualties, but destiny wasn't done with him yet. Morrison's unauthorized investigation began at 3:15 on the morning of February 23rd, when he used his security clearance to enter the restricted laboratory where the captured Würzburg components had been stored under military guard. The laboratory's silence was broken only by the electrical hum of testing equipment and the distant sound of night fighters taking off from nearby RAF stations, creating an atmosphere of tension that reflected the desperate urgency of Morrison's mission. Working by the light of a single desk lamp to avoid attracting attention from security patrols, Morrison began systematically dismantling the Würzburg system using techniques that violated every protocol established for analysis of captured enemy equipment. Rather than limiting himself to external measurements and conservative testing procedures, Morrison immediately began removing access panels and circuit boards to examine the internal construction that conventional analysis had avoided investigating. The first revelation came within 30 minutes, when Morrison discovered that the German radar system contained circuit innovations of breathtaking sophistication that completely exceeded anything in British radar technology. The Würzburg system employed a frequency modulation technique that enabled it to distinguish between different types of aircraft based on subtle variations in radar signature, allowing German operators to identify bomber formations while filtering out smaller fighter aircraft that might be providing escort. This capability meant that German radar controllers possessed advanced knowledge not only of Allied aircraft numbers and positions, but also of mission composition and strategic intent, providing unprecedented intelligence for positioning defensive forces with maximum effectiveness. Morrison realized with growing horror that every Allied bombing mission was announcing its tactical configuration to German defenses before crossing the Channel, enabling Luftwaffe controllers to deploy appropriate defensive measures with surgical precision. As Morrison continued his unauthorized analysis, each circuit board and component revealed additional innovations that demonstrated German radar technology had achieved capabilities that British intelligence had never suspected. The frequency control systems showed evidence of rapid tuning capabilities that would allow German radar installations to shift operating frequencies within seconds, making them essentially immune to the jamming techniques that Allied electronic warfare specialists had been developing based on assumptions about fixed German radar frequencies. The signal processing circuits contained analog computing elements that enabled real-time calculation of aircraft course, speed, and altitude with accuracy that exceeded British radar systems by an order of magnitude, providing German air defense controllers with predictive information that allowed interception of Allied aircraft with mathematical certainty. Perhaps most shocking was Morrison's discovery that the Würzburg system contained evidence of integration with a broader German radar network that encompassed installations throughout occupied Europe, creating a unified air defense system of unprecedented scope and capability. Circuit components designed for data transmission between radar installations revealed that individual German radar sites were sharing targeting information in real time, allowing the entire German air defense network to track individual Allied aircraft continuously from the moment they departed British airfields until they returned. This meant that German commanders possessed complete knowledge of Allied bombing operations throughout their duration, enabling defensive measures that could anticipate Allied tactical decisions and movements with devastating accuracy. Morrison's hands trembled as he examined circuit diagrams that revealed the true extent of German technological superiority, understanding that every assumption underlying Allied air operations had been catastrophically wrong. The mathematical implications were staggering. If German radar systems could detect Allied aircraft at ranges exceeding 150 miles and track them continuously throughout their missions while sharing targeting information across a continental network, then Allied bombing operations were not penetrating enemy defenses, but rather flying into carefully prepared killing zones where German fighters waited with complete advanced knowledge of their approach routes, timing, and tactical configuration. The casualty rates that had seemed mysteriously high to Allied commanders suddenly made perfect sense when viewed against the backdrop of German technological capabilities that rendered Allied aircraft visible and predictable from the moment they became airborne. But Morrison's most terrifying discovery came when he analyzed the power output specifications of the German radar system and realized that the Würzburg installation captured at Bruneval represented only a medium-range component of the German air defense network. Circuit designs indicated that larger German radar installations possessed power outputs and antenna configurations capable of detecting aircraft at ranges exceeding 300 miles, meaning that German radar coverage extended far beyond the Channel to encompass British airspace itself. Morrison understood with crystalline clarity that German radar operators were tracking Allied aircraft formations while they assembled over England, providing advance warning that allowed German defenses to prepare countermeasures before Allied bombers even departed for their targets. The implications extended beyond tactical considerations to encompass the fundamental strategy underlying Allied air operations. If German radar technology could observe aircraft movements throughout British airspace, then the entire concept of strategic surprise had become meaningless. And Allied bombing missions were proceeding according to German expectations, rather than achieving tactical advantage through unpredictability. Morrison realized that German air defense commanders possessed better intelligence about Allied bombing operations than many Allied commanders, creating a situation where German defensive preparations were based on more complete information than Allied offensive planning. As dawn approached, Morrison worked frantically to document his discoveries while understanding that his unauthorized analysis had revealed technological secrets that would fundamentally alter the course of the air war over Europe. Each circuit component contained innovations that represented years of advanced German research into radar technology, electronic warfare, and integrated air defense systems, demonstrating that Nazi Germany had achieved electronic superiority that posed an existential threat to Allied air operations. Morrison understood that his violation of direct orders had uncovered information crucial to Allied survival, but he also knew that presenting such discoveries would require acknowledging his unauthorized investigative methods and accepting responsibility for violating explicit military commands. The scale of Morrison's discoveries demanded immediate communication to the highest levels of Allied command, since the technological innovations revealed by his analysis required fundamental changes to Allied air strategy, electronic warfare development, and invasion planning. But Morrison also understood that his unauthorized methods had damaged the captured German equipment in ways that made conventional verification of his discoveries impossible, leaving him in the position of presenting revolutionary technical intelligence based on investigative techniques that military protocol considered illegitimate. As Morrison prepared to face the consequences of his technical rebellion, he realized that the information he had uncovered was so strategically significant that it justified any personal cost, even if it meant sacrificing his military career to expose the technological threat that Allied forces were facing. What happened next shattered 43 years of traditional thinking about the relationship between technological innovation and military authority. As one engineer's act of authorized disobedience forced Allied command to confront the terrifying sophistication of an enemy whose electronic capabilities had been systematically underestimated with potentially catastrophic consequences. Morrison's presentation of his unauthorized discoveries to Wing Commander Atkinson at 0800 hours on February 23rd created an immediate crisis that reverberated throughout the highest levels of British military command. Atkinson's initial fury at Morrison's violation of direct orders transformed into stunned comprehension as Morrison systematically demonstrated the technological innovations he had uncovered through his unauthorized analysis, using damaged circuit components and hastily drawn diagrams to illustrate German radar capabilities that exceeded British estimates by orders of magnitude. The mathematical implications of Morrison's discoveries were so profound that Atkinson immediately suspended normal protocol and initiated emergency communications with Air Ministry, requesting immediate consultation with Churchill's scientific advisors regarding intelligence that could fundamentally alter Allied understanding of German technological capabilities. Within 6 hours of Morrison's initial presentation, Senior technical officers from throughout the British scientific establishment had assembled at Farnborough to evaluate Morrison's discoveries and their implications for ongoing Allied air operations. The assembled experts included Robert Watson Watt himself, the primary architect of British radar development, along with leading specialists in electronic warfare, signals intelligence, and strategic planning, whose collective expertise represented the pinnacle of British scientific capability. Morrison found himself presenting his unauthorized discoveries to men whose names were legendary within the British technical community, explaining how his violation of military protocol had revealed technological innovations that these renowned experts had failed to detect through conventional analytical methods. Watson Watt's reaction to Morrison's discoveries was particularly significant, since his initial skepticism about claims of German technological superiority gradually transformed into recognition that Nazi Germany had achieved radar innovations that British development had not anticipated or countered. Morrison's demonstration of German frequency modulation techniques and integrated network capabilities forced Watson Watt to acknowledge that British assumptions about radar technology development had been fundamentally flawed, and that German engineers had pursued technical approaches that British radar specialists had not considered feasible with available electronic components. The implications were staggering. If German radar technology had achieved such advanced capabilities, then British radar development had fallen behind enemy innovations by at least 18 months, creating a technological gap that threatened not only current air operations but also future Allied strategic planning. The emergency technical conference continued throughout the day and into the evening, as Morrison's unauthorized discoveries forced complete reevaluation of Allied air strategy and electronic warfare capabilities. Intelligence officers began correlating Morrison's technical findings with operational reports from recent bombing missions, discovering patterns that confirmed the devastating effectiveness of German radar capabilities that Morrison had uncovered. Mission reports that had previously been attributed to improved German tactics or exceptional pilot performance suddenly made perfect sense when analyzed against Morrison's revelations about German radar detection ranges, tracking accuracy, and network integration capabilities. The mathematical analysis was terrifying in its clarity. Allied bomber losses during recent missions correlated precisely with the technological capabilities that Morrison had discovered in the captured German equipment, confirming that German air defense success resulted not from tactical superiority, but from electronic advantages that rendered Allied aircraft visible and predictable throughout their operations. Morrison's unauthorized investigation had revealed that Allied bombing missions were operating under technological disadvantages so severe that current casualty rates represented the inevitable consequence of German electronic superiority, rather than temporary tactical setbacks that improved Allied procedures could overcome. Perhaps most significantly, Morrison's discoveries forced immediate recognition that German radar technology posed a fundamental threat to Allied invasion planning, since the electronic capabilities he had uncovered would enable German forces to detect and track Allied invasion forces from the moment they departed British ports. If German radar systems could observe aircraft movements throughout British airspace and track individual formations across the Channel, then similar capabilities applied to naval forces would provide German defenders with advance warning that could enable devastating counterattacks against Allied invasion beaches. Morrison's unauthorized analysis had revealed that the entire strategic premise underlying Allied planning for the invasion of occupied Europe was based on assumptions about German technological capabilities that were catastrophically incorrect. The immediate consequence of Morrison's discoveries was the authorization of a crash program to develop electronic countermeasures capable of neutralizing the German radar advantages that his analysis had revealed. Morrison found himself transferred from routine technical analysis to leadership of a top-secret development team tasked with creating jamming systems, deception techniques, and radar countermeasures that could restore tactical balance to Allied air operations. The irony was profound. Morrison's violation of military protocol had earned him promotion to one of the most critical technical positions in the Allied war effort, responsible for developing technologies that could potentially save thousands of Allied aircrew lives while enabling the strategic bombing operations essential to Allied victory. Morrison's unauthorized technical rebellion had also initiated fundamental changes to British approaches to captured enemy equipment analysis, as senior commanders recognized that conventional analytical protocols were inadequate for understanding rapidly evolving wartime technologies. The rigid procedures that had prevented Morrison from conducting comprehensive reverse engineering were replaced by more aggressive investigative techniques that prioritized rapid intelligence gathering over equipment preservation, acknowledging that understanding enemy technological capabilities was more valuable than maintaining captured equipment in pristine condition for lengthy conventional analysis. The broader implications of Morrison's discoveries extended throughout Allied strategic planning, as commanders grappled with the realization that German technological capabilities had been systematically underestimated across multiple domains of warfare. If German radar technology had achieved such advanced capabilities without British intelligence awareness, then similar technological advantages might exist in other areas where Allied planning depended upon assumptions about German technical limitations. Morrison's unauthorized investigation had exposed not only specific technological threats, but also fundamental weaknesses in Allied intelligence gathering and analysis that could prove equally dangerous in other areas of military technology. Within 3 months of Morrison's unauthorized analysis, the first electronic countermeasures based on his discoveries were deployed operationally, beginning with simple jamming systems that targeted the specific frequencies and modulation techniques that Morrison had identified in the German radar equipment. The immediate results were dramatic. Allied bomber losses decreased by 38% during missions employing Morrison's countermeasures, confirming that his unauthorized discoveries had indeed revealed the primary source of German air defense effectiveness. Morrison watched operational reports with profound satisfaction, understanding that his violation of direct orders was saving Allied aircrew lives on a nightly basis while enabling bombing operations that conventional German radar capabilities would have rendered impossible. But Morrison's most significant contribution was yet to come, as his unauthorized analysis provided the foundation for developing the revolutionary electronic warfare techniques that would ultimately enable Allied air superiority over occupied Europe during the crucial months preceding the invasion. The technological innovations that Morrison had discovered through his act of technical rebellion would reshape not only immediate tactical operations, but also the fundamental relationship between electronic warfare and military strategy, establishing principles that would influence military technology development for decades to follow. Morrison never called himself a hero, but the men who flew bombing missions over occupied Europe during the summer of 1944 owed their lives to one engineer's willingness to violate direct orders in pursuit of technological truth that conventional military procedures had failed to uncover. The long-term consequences of Morrison's unauthorized technical rebellion extended far beyond the immediate development of radar countermeasures, fundamentally altering British approaches to military technology development and intelligence analysis for the remainder of the war and beyond. Morrison's discoveries had demonstrated that conventional analytical protocols were inadequate for understanding rapidly evolving military technologies, leading to the establishment of new investigative procedures that prioritized rapid intelligence gathering over equipment preservation and encouraged innovative analytical techniques, even when they violated traditional protocol. These methodological changes proved crucial during the final years of the war, as Allied technical teams applied Morrison's aggressive analytical approaches to captured German jet aircraft, rocket technology, and electronic systems, uncovering technological innovations that conventional analysis might have missed, with potentially catastrophic consequences for Allied strategic planning. Morrison's personal trajectory following his unauthorized analysis reflected the profound impact that his technical rebellion had achieved within the broader British scientific establishment. Rather than facing court-martial for his violation of direct orders, Morrison found himself promoted to squadron leader and appointed as chief technical officer for the newly established Electronic Warfare Development Section, responsible for coordinating all British efforts to understand and counter German electronic systems. His unauthorized expertise in German radar technology made him the natural leader for developing the sophisticated jamming systems and deception techniques that would prove essential to Allied air superiority over occupied Europe during the crucial months surrounding the invasion of Normandy. The electronic warfare capabilities that Morrison developed based on his unauthorized discoveries played a decisive role during Operation Overlord, as Allied aircraft employed comprehensive jamming systems that neutralized German radar coverage over the invasion beaches, while deception transmitters created false aircraft formations that drew German fighters away from actual Allied bomber formations. Morrison personally supervised the electronic warfare operations from a mobile command center positioned aboard a Royal Navy destroyer, watching radar screens that displayed the successful neutralization of German air defenses that had seemed invincible before his unauthorized analysis revealed their technological foundations. The invasion succeeded in part because Morrison's violation of military protocol had provided Allied forces with electronic warfare capabilities that German defenders had not anticipated or prepared to counter. Perhaps most significantly, Morrison's unauthorized discoveries initiated a fundamental transformation in Allied scientific methodology that extended far beyond military applications to influence post-war technological development. The aggressive analytical techniques that Morrison had employed to understand German radar technology became the foundation for systematic reverse engineering programs that enabled rapid Allied advancement in jet propulsion, electronic computing, and guided missile technology. Morrison's willingness to violate conventional protocol in pursuit of technological understanding had established precedents that encouraged innovative, investigative approaches throughout the Allied scientific community, accelerating technological development in ways that proved crucial to maintaining Allied strategic advantage during the early years of the Cold War. Morrison's post-war career reflected his unique position as the engineer whose unauthorized technical rebellion had reshaped Allied understanding of electronic warfare while establishing new paradigms for military technology analysis. Following his demobilization in 1946, Morrison accepted a position with the newly established Royal Radar Establishment, where he continued developing electronic warfare systems while training a new generation of technical officers in the aggressive analytical techniques that his unauthorized investigation had pioneered. His influence extended throughout the emerging field of electronic intelligence gathering. As former colleagues who had observed Morrison's unauthorized methods applied similar approaches to Soviet technology during the developing tensions that would define the Cold War era. The human impact of Morrison's unauthorized discoveries was perhaps most powerfully expressed through the letters that he received from Allied aircrew who had survived bombing missions that Morrison's countermeasures had made possible. Morrison kept a collection of over 300 letters from pilots, navigators, gunners, and bombardiers who explicitly credited their survival to the electronic warfare systems that Morrison had developed based on his unauthorized analysis of captured German equipment. These letters described not only individual survival stories, but also the families, careers, and contributions that these men were able to pursue, because Morrison's violation of military protocol had enabled them to return safely from bombing operations over occupied Europe. One particularly poignant letter came from Flight Lieutenant Peter Hammond, a bomber pilot who had completed 37 missions over occupied territory during the period when Morrison's countermeasures were first deployed operationally. Hammond described how electronic jamming systems had enabled his bomber formation to penetrate German airspace without detection during 3 separate missions that conventional radar would have rendered suicidal, allowing him to complete his operational tour and return to civilian life, where he became a mathematics teacher in rural Somerset. Hammond's letter expressed gratitude not only for his personal survival, but also for the opportunity to influence hundreds of students whose mathematical education benefited from lessons taught by a man whose survival depended upon Morrison's unauthorized technical rebellion. Morrison's influence on subsequent military technology development was formally recognized through his appointment as Chief Scientific Advisor to the Ministry of Defense during the 1950s, where his expertise in electronic warfare and technological analysis proved crucial to British strategic planning during the early nuclear age. His aggressive analytical methods, originally developed through unauthorized investigation of captured German equipment, became standard protocol for analyzing Soviet military technology and evaluating potential threats from emerging electronic warfare capabilities. Morrison's unauthorized rebellion had not only saved Allied aircrew during the Second World War, but had also established technological assessment capabilities that proved essential to British national security during the subsequent decades of global tension. The mathematical legacy of Morrison's discoveries was equally significant, as his unauthorized analysis of German radar technology had revealed the fundamental importance of electronic warfare in modern military operations and established quantitative methods for evaluating technological threats that continued to influence strategic planning throughout the Cold War era. Morrison's calculations demonstrating the decisive impact of electronic warfare capabilities on operational success became the foundation for military planning models that prioritize technological superiority over numerical advantage, fundamentally altering strategic thinking about the relationship between innovation and military effectiveness. Morrison retired from government service in 1968. Returning to his childhood home in Yorkshire, where he spent his final years restoring antique mechanical clocks while occasionally consulting on electronic warfare projects for selected defense contractors. His workshop, filled with precision gears and delicate escapement mechanisms, provided a peaceful environment where Morrison could reflect upon the technological revolution that his unauthorized analysis had initiated, while pursuing the mechanical craftsmanship that had originally inspired his engineering career. Visitors to Morrison's workshop often remarked upon the contrast between the gentle precision of clock restoration and the aggressive technological investigation that had defined Morrison's wartime service, though Morrison himself saw no contradiction between the methodical patience required for mechanical restoration and the innovative courage necessary for effective technical analysis. Morrison died peacefully in 1987, surrounded by family members who understood that their grandfather's violation of military protocol during a desperate February morning in 1943 had altered the course of history while saving countless Allied lives through technological innovation that conventional analytical methods would never have achieved. His funeral was attended by former colleagues, surviving aircrew, and government officials who recognized that Morrison's unauthorized technical rebellion had established principles of aggressive technological analysis that continued to influence military planning and strategic thinking decades after his original discoveries. The workshop where Morrison had spent his retirement years was preserved as a memorial to his contributions, displaying both the mechanical clocks that reflected his lifelong fascination with precision engineering and the technical documents that recorded his unauthorized analysis of German radar technology. Visitors to the memorial consistently expressed amazement at the contrast between the conventional mechanical craftsmanship and the revolutionary electronic warfare innovations that emerged from the same engineering mind. Though those who knew Morrison personally understood that both pursuits reflected identical commitments to understanding complex systems through patient analysis and innovative investigation. Morrison's story remains required reading at military technical colleges throughout the Allied nations, where his unauthorized analysis of captured German equipment serves as a case study in the importance of innovative investigative methods and the dangers of rigid analytical protocols when facing rapidly evolving technological threats. His legacy demonstrates that effective military technology assessment requires not only technical expertise, but also the intellectual courage to pursue unconventional investigative approaches when conventional methods prove inadequate for understanding critical threats. The broader implications of Morrison's unauthorized technical rebellion continue to influence contemporary discussions about the relationship between military protocol and technological innovation, as defense planners grapple with similar challenges when evaluating emerging threats from advanced military technologies developed by potential adversaries. Morrison's example demonstrates that rigid adherence to conventional analytical procedures can prove catastrophically inadequate when facing innovative technologies that require equally innovative investigative approaches, and that effective national security sometimes requires technical personnel willing to violate established protocols in pursuit of critical intelligence. Morrison's unauthorized investigation of captured German radar equipment ultimately revealed that the most dangerous enemy facing Allied forces was not German tactical superiority or strategic planning, but rather the systematic underestimation of German technological capabilities that resulted from inadequate analytical methods and excessive procedural caution. His willingness to violate direct orders in pursuit of technological understanding had exposed the mathematical reality that Allied air operations were proceeding under assumptions that rendered them vulnerable to German electronic warfare capabilities of unprecedented sophistication and effectiveness. The fundamental question raised by Morrison's story involves the relationship between individual initiative and institutional authority when facing technological challenges that conventional approaches cannot adequately address. Morrison's unauthorized analysis succeeded precisely because it violated established protocols that prioritized equipment preservation over intelligence gathering, demonstrating that effective technological assessment sometimes requires investigative methods that institutional authority considers unacceptable or inappropriate. Morrison's legacy poses challenging questions about the balance between innovative investigation and procedural compliance in contemporary military technology assessment as defense organizations continue to grapple with emerging threats from advanced technologies that may require analytical approaches that violate conventional protocol. His example suggests that effective national security depends not only upon technological expertise and analytical resources, but also upon institutional willingness to encourage innovative investigation even when it challenges established procedures and conventional assumptions. The mathematical precision of Morrison's discoveries, combined with their profound strategic implications, demonstrates how individual technical innovation can achieve results that institutional resources and conventional methodology fail to accomplish. Morrison's unauthorized analysis revealed technological threats that had escaped detection by extensive conventional investigation conducted by highly qualified personnel using established procedures, proving that innovative approaches can uncover critical intelligence that systematic analysis overlooks or misses entirely. Morrison's story ultimately illustrates the fundamental tension between technological innovation and institutional authority that continues to influence military planning and strategic thinking in an era of rapidly evolving technological threats. His unauthorized rebellion demonstrated that effective defense against advanced technological threats requires not only technical expertise and analytical resources, but also the intellectual courage to pursue unconventional investigative approaches when conventional methods prove inadequate for understanding critical challenges to national security. The question that Morrison's legacy poses to contemporary readers involves whether they would possess the courage to violate established protocol and challenge institutional authority when faced with evidence that conventional approaches were failing to address critical technological threats. Morrison's unauthorized analysis required not only technical expertise, but also the willingness to sacrifice personal security and professional advancement in pursuit of technological understanding that could save lives and alter strategic outcomes. Would you have broken the orders that prioritized equipment preservation over intelligence gathering, or would you have obeyed the established protocols that were allowing German technological superiority to remain hidden behind bureaucratic caution? Morrison's story demonstrates that the most important technological discoveries sometimes require the courage to challenge authority and violate established procedures in pursuit of truth that conventional analysis cannot uncover. Comment below and share this story so others remember that technological innovation often demands the intellectual courage to question authority and pursue unconventional approaches when facing threats that established methods cannot adequately address.